Hello, Genies, and welcome to part 1 of Resources for Researching Your War of 1812 Ancestors online. I'm Elizabeth Swanee O'Neill, a professional genealogist based in California, and I'm thrilled to be with you here today at the 2022 Roots Tech Connect Conference. The War of 1812 may be a forgotten war for some, but many valuable genealogical resources were created as a result of this conflict. Could your ancestor have been involved in America's Second Revolutionary War? Before we go on, I just have a quick reminder. The content of this video, as well as the thoughts, views, and opinions expressed herein, belong solely to the creator, that's me, and do not necessarily reflect the views of Family Search International and Roots Tech. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is part 1 of a 2-part session. So here's what we're going to talk about in part 1. We'll start by discussing how to identify an ancestor who may have served in the War of 1812 and how to locate his service record. In part 2, we'll talk about War of 1812 pension records, as well as resources to fill out his military story by doing some research on his regiment. So let's get started. A little history first. The War of 1812 between the United States and Great Britain began on June 18, 1812, with the United States formally declaring war on the United Kingdom. It involved about 60,000 U.S. Army forces and was supported by 470,000 militia and volunteer troops. The War of 1812 was actually part of a larger global conflict. England and France spent 1789 to 1815 locked in an almost constant war for global superiority, and that war stretched from Europe to North Africa and to Asia. When the Americans declared war on England, the war engulfs North America as well. The United States had a variety of grievances against Britain. Many felt that the British had not yet come to respect the United States as a legitimate country. The British were impressing American sailors at sea, which was the practice of compelling men into military or naval service without giving notice, as well as blocking American trade with France. The British were also supporting Native American groups who were in conflict with American settlers along the frontier. The resentment by the U.S. towards Britain led to the declaration of war by Congress. Peace negotiations began in late 1814, but slow communication across the Atlantic prolonged the war. The Treaty of Ghent was signed by the British and United States delegates on December 24, 1814, to be formally enacted when each side ratified the treaty. The treaty was ratified by the U.S. Senate on February 17, 1815. The war lasted a total of 2 years and 8 months. If your ancestor served in the War of 1812, you may be able to find some great records that he left behind. So let's start by talking about how to identify an ancestor who may have served in the War of 1812. An ancestor's date of birth can be a big clue. Most soldiers and sailors were between the ages of 18 and 30. So they would have been born between 1782 and 1796. However, some were boys as young as 10, and some were as old as 70, which widens the span of possible birth years to between 1742 and 1804. An ancestor's date or place of death can also be a clue. Did your ancestor die between June 18, 1812 and February 17, 1815? Did he die in a different state from where his family was living? These clues might indicate that he died as a soldier or sailor in the War of 1812. An ancestor's residence may also provide a clue. Where was your ancestor living when the war broke out in 1812? Most of the soldiers and sailors were men from these locations. Canada. A majority of these soldiers came from the province of Ontario. Great Britain. They may have come from anywhere in the British Isles, although the majority were from England. United States. Soldiers and sailors came from all the states and territories in existence at that time, which included Connecticut, Delaware, Massachusetts, which also included Maine, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, and the territories of Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Mississippi, and Missouri. Many of the early census records, particularly those from 1790 through 1820, have been lost as a result of mishandling or neglect. But there are some that survive. You may be able to locate your ancestor and his family in the 1810 or 1820 U.S. Census, which is free to search on the Family Search website. You may find clues to War of 1812 service in an ancestor's obituary. In this example for Hiram Cronk, it states that age 105, he was the last surviving War of 1812 veteran. Many newspapers ran articles to commemorate the anniversary of the war. This article from the Pantagraph in Bloomington, Illinois, dated June 8, 1912, was published to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the War of 1812. It gives a listing of soldiers from that war who were buried in the county. You might find an ancestor listed in the rolls of lineage societies. Two such societies are the General Society of the War of 1812 for men and the National Society United States Daughters of 1812 for women, as well as for boys and girls through age 21. The Daughters of 1812 have a wonderful ancestor database, which we'll talk about in a few moments. Veterans' grave markers may also provide a clue. Here are two examples of commemorative markers that can be placed on a War of 1812 veterans' graves. These are from the Kalamazoo Flag Company and Flags for Veterans. These are examples of grave markers that were placed by the National Society United States Daughters of 1812 to commemorate a veteran's service. The star and anchor are symbols of that society. Your family may be lucky enough to find letters or diaries that provide clues to War of 1812 service. Examples of these can be found online. This letter, dated October 10, 1814, was written by John Black, an American soldier, to Abner Austin. It reads in part, "I have gone through a new series of action since I left Catskill. I have changed my profession from that of a paper maker to a soldier, changed the useful paper mold for the cruel implements of death, changed the domestic circle for the din of arms, the social fireside for the tented field." Veterans' reunions were very popular, and it's possible that you might find a newspaper article covering the reunion. This rare image is from a reunion of War of 1812 veterans at William Botsford Jarvis's home on October 23, 1861. The image is from Toronto Public Library. You should next try to locate your ancestors' compiled military service record. A volunteer's compiled service record consists of an envelope containing card abstracts taken from muster rolls, returns, pay vouchers, and other records. The abstracted information may include references to wounds, hospitalization, absence from the unit, court-martial, and death. Family Search's database, United States War of 1812 Index to Service Records, 1812 to 1815, provides a name index to compiled military service records of volunteer soldiers who served in the War of 1812. The index is arranged in alphabetical order by surname, and the collection can be searched or browsed image by image. Using the index, I was able to find the record of my ancestor, John Blanton. As you can see, the original document is available. Just a side note, I actually viewed this file in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and sadly, this card was the only document in the file, which was a bit disappointing. So here's a larger view of the card for John Blanton and also one for his brother Jesse. Both brothers served in Captain Irvine's company of the North Carolina Militia, John as a private and Jesse as a sergeant. Ancestry.com's U.S. War of 1812 service records, 1812 to 1815, is similar to the Family Search database. Unfortunately, at Ancestry, you will not get to see the actual document, but rather an index of the information found on the card, as well as the roll box and the microfilm publication number. Also at Ancestry is the database UK British Army Muster Books and Pay Lists, 1812 to 1817. This series contains selected muster books and pay lists of the cavalry, foot guards, and regular infantry regiments of the line. Also included are special regiments or corps, colonial troops, various foreign legions and troops, garrison battalions, veteran battalions, and depots. The majority of muster books and pay lists cover the period from 1812 to 1817 during the Napoleonic Wars and the Anglo-American War, though some rolls go back as far as 1779 and also up to 1821. Here's an example of a document that you might find. This is a page from a payment book for the 38th Regiment of Foot, 1st Battalion. Online War of 1812 Indexes and Records website includes links to general indexes and records as well as those broken down by state. Now this is really a collection of links, so the information you'll find varies greatly by state. And here's what you'll see when you land on the War of 1812 page. Let's look at one example, the Delaware muster rolls for the War of 1812 from the Delaware Public Archives. The link brings you to the state of Delaware's War of 1812 commemorative page. And if you scroll on down that page, you'll see listings of the categories of documents that are available for viewing. I've selected the Military Reports category, and here is the landing page for that. You can see how those documents are broken down even further. From this, I selected the link to muster rolls, and this image is from a muster roll dated 1813. Now, documents on this site are available to download in PDF format. Let's look at another example. This one is from farther down on the Online War of 1812 Indexes page, and it is the North Carolina War of 1812 pay vouchers. This goes to the North Carolina Digital Collections, which is a wonderful website for anyone doing North Carolina research. This collection contains about 5,000 vouchers, also called certificates, which were issued instead of cash by the governor after the auditor had validated a claim. Most of these were for military service, and there are vouchers for 31 counties only. So click on the Browse button, and here is what you'll see. You can filter by place, time period, and title, which is basically the soldier's name. And here is the voucher for one William Herring from Wayne County, dated 1815. You can see that the voucher was redeemed because canceled vouchers have a hole punched through them. There are 2 pages, and you can click the buttons on the right to print or download the images to your computer. Another place where you might find a service record is the National Society United States Daughters of 1812's Ancestor database. Members of this society are female descendants of a patriot who fought in or aided the American War of 1812. The database currently contains about 40,000 records that have been officially verified by the society. And only War of 1812 veterans who have been referenced on a member's approved application are listed in the database. So don't feel discouraged if your veteran isn't listed. It just means that you need to join, so your ancestor will be included. Now, it's important to note that the requirement for membership in the NSUSD of 1812 includes service other than as a soldier or sailor in the War of 1812. So you may find an ancestor listed who did not serve in the war but is honored for a different reason. When you open the database, scroll down below the fold and you'll find the actual Ancestor database. If you're familiar with the website Airtable, then you might recognize this as an Airtable database. It's fairly simple in structure, with each entry showing up on an individual card. To search, click Filter on the left of the table, and then click Add Filter. You can add any number of filters, such as ancestor last name, first name, birth date, death state, etc. And this is really helpful when researching ancestors with common names. You can also search for the spouse's name, the ancestor's child's name, and the child's spouse's name, which is really helpful when searching for descendants of the qualifying ancestor. So here is an example of a search for my ancestor, Leroy Taylor, using 4 search filters: last name, first name, death state, and death date. A simple search for the surname Taylor brought up way too many results, including names like Staylor with an S, so it helps to use more filters to narrow down searches. So here's another example of the results when using 2 filters, last name and first name. 3 cards are available to choose from, which means there are 3 different applications for this ancestor. Click on the card to enlarge it. And you'll need to scroll down to see all of the information. Results include the state where an ancestor served, his rank, regiment, spouse's name, and the name of the child through which the member descended, and that child's spouse's name. So you can see there really is some great information available through this organization. Now, just a side note here, I've obscured the member numbers and names of living persons with blue dots for privacy reasons. These will not be obscured when you do an actual search on the website, and you will be able to get the membership number, which you'll need when requesting a copy of the application. Now, between us, this database is a bit cumbersome to search, so if you're interested in learning more, I've included a link in your handout to a blog post that I've written with detailed instructions on how to search the USD 1812 Ancestor database, so please do feel free to check that out. So this concludes part 1 of Resources for Researching Your War of 1812 Ancestor online. Please tune in to part 2, where we'll be talking about War of 1812 pension records and a variety of websites to help you research the regiment in which your ancestor served. Thank you.